Hello, this is your Sunday lecture for creative analysis. We will be talking again this week about Good Country People. I wasn't sure if we would do that, but I just really loved reading what you wrote, and I think there's more to say. I think partly I want to do it another week because I want you to spend time seeing what some of your classmates have said, everybody, so that you can share those ideas in a forum and get to know different perspectives of this story. So we'll be doing that in your creative analysis assignment. There's 2 pieces for creative analysis this week. The first, and do this one first, is to read through all of your peers' contributions in the creative analysis strand and choose one that particularly connects with you in some way. You like what they're saying, you're interested in it, you have a question for them, something that connects to you, and respond to them. So we'll get a dialogue going between you all and the creative analysis posts that you put up last week, which will help everybody this week. We'll be looking at the story through a different lens, but the same elements of story are there. The characters and their complexity, it's all still there. So having this breadth of knowledge from your peers and from continued study of your own thoughts will only enhance what you're going to do this week. So the first assignment, it's social in nature, social in connecting thoughts together. The second assignment is the new lens for this week, which is narration. So I want you to simply put here, choose a quote from Good Country People that reveals something interesting about the narration. How does the choice that the narrator makes impact or shape the story in some way? I leave that to you to decide what you're going to do with. There's a lot of different roads that you could walk on when it comes to the narrator. But I want to spend a little bit of time explaining what I think that means and then what takeaways there are when it comes to narration in any story. So the narrator is a really important part of our curriculum. It's the 4th strand of our 7 strands. There's 2 in particular you'll exercise today. 4A, which is just identify and describe the narrator. It's a simpler matter, often, not always, to identify what kind of narrator is this. The narrator frames the story for you. They choose the scope of what it is that you're going to see and what you're not going to see. And they do that by choosing one of these perspectives. First person, the I, the we, the me perspective. Or third person, which is the he, she, they. There's also second person, and that happens, though rarely, but we did get to see it in Girl by Jamaica Kincaid. Within these choices, first person, third person, the narrator also decides whether their perspective will be objective, that is, they don't reveal the inner thoughts of any character, whether it will be limited, which is them looking inside of the mind of one character or several characters, but not all, or whether it will be omniscient, all-knowing, seeing into everybody's minds. So you can see already you'll have combinations of these. You'll have potentially first-person objective or third-person limited, which is what I will argue Good Country People is. But I think it's an argument. I think you can make a case for it being omniscient. So those are the simple identification pieces that you'll exercise when you're thinking about any story that we encounter. And you might remember that. This is something that we often are taught long before now. The second strand is identifying the function of that. Why does that matter? What is the function of the point of view in a narrative? It matters how the story is told. And we know that just implicitly. One of the ways that narrators play with this is when they have a multi-perspective story. So you see the same event from many different characters' point of view. So we know that who is telling the story matters. The narrator has power then over the story. They are the ones controlling the story from their perspective, what it is that they're seeing when they look, and their position, how they're looking, from what vantage point, from within one character's mind, from outside of everyone's minds. That's position. So when they choose a narration, they're going to do it to advance a particular point. Your job is to figure out, well, what is the point of that? They are going to advance a story in a certain way, and you, as the reader, will continue asking, yeah, but how? Why? And that's where you have power. So the narrator has power over the story through their perspective and their position, but the reader has power over the story because you can question the story itself. You can question characters and what they say about themselves. You can doubt characters, you can trust characters, and you can question the narrator and their objectivity and their narration. So we'll do that in this story, and I'm arguing it's third person. I think that's fairly clear. I don't think there's a case to be made for first person at all. Third person point of view is when the narrator is not a character in the story. That's true of Good Country People. So it's either objective, does not convey anybody's thoughts or feelings. It's limited, it conveys the thoughts and feelings of one or a handful of characters, or it's omniscient, it's aware of every character's perspective. Omni means all, and scienta means knowing, so all knowing, omniscient, omnipotent, omnipotent, as we say. So Good Country People, I'm arguing, is third person limited. I'm arguing that because we never see inside of the mind of Manly Pointer. And I think that's an important enough omission to characterize the narration. You could argue, though, that it is omniscient, that there's a way in which you can see inside of every character's mind in some way or another. So it's not quite so cut and dry with this story. But anyway, that's something you can take up in your creative analysis if you choose. So this is the assignment. As I'm saying, choose a quote that reveals something interesting about the narration and then make meaning from it. And here is my model. I'm interested in Mrs. Freeman. I mean, she starts the story and she ends the story. That seems important to me. When we talk about the frame of the narration, she's the frame. She is the one who boxes it in and out. So I want to understand a little bit more about her, and I'm choosing to discover whether the narrator goes inside of her mind, because it's not clear to me. So I found a couple of quotes. You can pick a couple if you need to. I picked two, but you can pick one too. I said just pick one, and I couldn't even keep to my own assignment. So Mrs. Freeman, it says at one point in the story, had a special fondness for the details of secret infections and infirmities, assaults upon children, of diseases she preferred the lingering or incurable. I cannot figure out if this is a part of how Joy Holga sees Mrs. Freeman, in which case that would be a perspective outside of Mrs. Freeman, or if it's coming from within Mrs. Freeman's own mind, that we're learning about this because we're getting a quick glimpse into how Mrs. Freeman sees the world. She likes cruelties and deformities. I am choosing to believe that we actually do get a little glimpse into her own mind, but I'll try to explain why I think that's a little complicated. And then there's this other quote that it's in the first paragraph of the story, begins to again reveal the inside of her mind. She seldom used the other expression because it was not often necessary for her to retract a statement. But when she did, her face came to a complete stop. All right, so the first and the third part of that sentence are objective. Those are things you can observe. But that middle part, because it was not often necessary for her to retract a statement, that sounds to me like we are floating briefly inside of Mrs. Freeman's mind. That's the way she sees herself, as somebody who doesn't necessarily ever have to retract statements. So I'm putting those two things together as I write my creative analysis, and I'm trying to understand them. I write, we never really see inside of Mrs. Freeman's mind. We get these small moments where the narrator begins to peek inside, offers some view as to what motivates Mrs. Freeman, yet there is mostly a shroud over her inner workings, her internal self-talk. In this way, she's a foil to Manly Pointer, whose mind remains shut off from the reader. Only his completely is shut off. Yet while Pointer's mind is cloaked in mystery to align with his deceit, he's running a con, Mrs. Freeman's mind is hidden because there isn't much there to begin with. She is a machine, and she is not there in spirit, as another part of the quote says. Her platitudes reflect a sort of hollowed out identity, a lack of complication due to a lack of introspection. So what I'm basically arguing here is I just don't think there's much there to see. I think she's so far removed from herself that when you go inside of her mind, it's just this empty platitudes sort of filled space. I think there's a lot more going on inside of Mrs. Hopewell's mind, even though she too is engaged in some self-deceit. So narration, trying to understand narration as it impacts character. That is your task. Good luck. Post it, please, in the thread on the discussion board, but then also keep in the BGD. And just to be clear, you are responding to your peers' creative analysis from last week. That way everyone definitely has something to respond to. And this week, you can read them as they come in, but I'm not asking you to respond to those since they all come in at different times.